Y'all, welcome to the first episode of Connecting the Dots. When we think about dots, a lot of times we highlight the dots of our wins and we highlight the dots of our losses, but there's not enough stories and conversations about the dots of the in-betweens and within the transitions. And these conversations are really about highlighting the messy middle that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of times we like to glamorize between one dot to the next, but there's something in between that's happening. It could be that half a dot that people forget is a part of the whole process. And I wish people would acknowledge, like, it stinks being the new person. And so, like, I even think about, like, when I was a kid and, like, being a new, like, I was, when the new kid came into class, I really tried to always be that person that connected with them, be like, hey, welcome to class. You know what I mean? And whatever we were learning, this is multiplication. Can I show you the rest of the school? And so what does that look like as adults and, like, in this bigger playground called Earth in the world?
So kind of encourage folks to not be on the two opposite spectrums, but kind of explore that middle of like, okay, well, it's kind of not in my comfort zone, but I'm super comfortable in this. I want to like grow more. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go. But, for the ones that you aren't super comfortable in, you don't have to go jump into the deep end, but just allow curiosity to really kind of reign, because once you're older the curiosity goes away and you kind of end up feeling this hit of like nostalgia and like, oh man, I was so curious when I was a kid. But I think as adults we chase that curiosity back, like we want that back in our cup.
I was going to be like, sis, speak for yourself because I got questions. And I really ran with that as a kid, right? When our teachers said, like, there's no such thing as a silly question, I was like, all right, I'm going to take that with me. So I'm curious of how you're cultivating curiosity due to having this Taurus rising. I'm just kidding. Yeah, how are you currently?
I think because I'm an introverted, somewhat stubborn homebody, I do force myself to go to situations that is like completely opposite of me as a person. The most common one is going to networking events alone. Like, I know a lot of folks are like, bring a buddy, have a buddy. What if you live in a city and you've only been here for 6 months and most of your friends, love them to death, have W-2 jobs? You end up going to things by yourself. And in the past, I would kind of use that as a cop out of like, I don't want to go, I'll be by myself. Now that I've lived in a new city, I do force myself to just be like, look, we don't have to stay long. You don't have to talk to everybody. Just talk to whoever you gravitate towards and then call it a day and then recover as long as you need. Yeah, I feel like that's been my whole motto the last 4 years. It's just, we're just gonna try this out and see how it goes. It's like owning a business. Let's just try it out. Jumping into photos, let's just try it out. Like now entering like that video arena, like, okay, well, let's just see how it goes. That's I feel like has been my mental and just inward motivation to myself, is just like, let's just keep trying. And I know this might get a little sad and dark, but I know it is a part of it is because I, during my 20s, got really, really traumatic experiences happening in my life. I lost both of my parents before I turned 30. My mom passed away at 23, and then my father passed away when I was 26. Age is rough, but essentially before I turned 30, I had no parents. And I think it definitely drove me to, let's just try it out. Like, let me just try something once, because it's either I'm really gonna like it and I'm gonna keep going, or I'm really not gonna like it and then I'm just gonna pivot and go somewhere else. So I think that whole thing of like trying things at least once really comes with interplay of loss and grief, and we're just gonna keep trying things until the expiration date comes. And since the expiration dates in my experience have been quite short, you kind of just feel like, okay, well, I turned 32. My mom passed away at 61. It's like, oh, I'm kind of well in the halfway point of like when my mom passed. So let's just kind of keep trying and going, because what else? What do we have to lose at this point? If the business goes well, then yay, that means I can just keep growing. If the business goes stagnant, then we can like, okay, well, do we want to keep going or do we want to finally throw in the towel and say, hey, at least I had a business and I tried it out. And
Yeah.
now I can move on to like another chapter and phase in my life. At the very least, in my deathbed, I was like, well, I kind of tried everything I wanted to try.
Thanks for sharing that. I can only imagine, what that experience is like. But I love that you are, shifting your perspective on that and being like, what do I got to lose? You know what I mean? And unfortunately realizing like you've lost such a big part of your life already, but it's like now it's like you move into things with maybe a sense of fearlessness or not even fearlessness. I know you enough that you're like, oh, there's fear there, but you go do it anyways. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
really admirable. Thanks for sharing that.
Nice. I'm trying to be more open of that fact. And a lot of folks, it's always a mixed bag. Like some folks get really uncomfortable with death and grieving. And then there are some folks that are very comfortable with death and grieving. So you always will never know, but I think it's just such a ironclad fact of my life.
Mm.
I say this as someone who has gone through multiple stages of burnout, really honoring how much your capacity is. If you can only like do this little leap, that's still a leap. They're the same. It's still the perspective is still the same. You're still going from one point to another. So to go on the length Olympics, I feel like it doesn't really help anybody, especially as a creative person. So you take the little things, you take the little wins. So all the small wins, the small projects, the small connections, like I try and stack them on because there will be days where you look at your small stack and you're just like, I've done absolutely nothing with my life. But kind of remembering that you've taken these leaps, like those are still big things because you're essentially moving from one version of yourself to another version of yourself. Little leaps are great.
And I love that you put the perspective of this little leap still is this, but if you actually zoom into it, right? Like if this is that you zoom that you're still making headway. And I love that you pointed out like so many times we see the big leaps, and that's what we're seeing. And I say that for myself because that's how I've typically maneuvered in the past. If it's not from here to here, then like I start stalling in a sense. I'm like, oh gosh, that's such a big leap. I don't know if I have the quads for that. You know what I mean? Like I don't, but like, do I have a hop? Do I have a hop? You know what I mean? And so I really appreciate you for acknowledging that because what I'm hearing so far in your journey thus far is like it is just like these little leaps, these little hops from one thing to the next. And like what I'm observing is that you're not planning like this whole thing, like of how it's going to happen. You're like, I know this much. I know the next step. And at the very least, I'm going to take the next best step, right?
Okay, number 4, on the vein of advice, take what you need. Because, yes, elders can talk your ear off, give you all advice in the world, but only you know how you want your business to go. Only you know how you want your creativity to flow. Only you know how you want the rest of your life to go. So take what you need and run with it. And number 5, drink water.
Last question is what have you learned most about yourself during these 3 major transitions in the very young life you've been living?
I am very capable to just shut my little nagging, unsure self up sometimes. And we're like, we're just gonna try this. We're gonna try this. Because what else is it gonna do? It's gonna fail? Okay, cool. You know, I think that's definitely upon like major reflection. It's like I've gone through multiple transitions. I've gone through a lot of lows, but the capability to still just try things, see where it goes, even if they're unconventional, even if they're not advisable, even if it's not garnering the income the fastest. What else are we supposed to do in our lives? Are we just gonna just make millions and millions of dollars each time? Or life is just a book of mistakes and wins and milestones that you can look back on. So I'll take that option. Yeah, that's me.
Again, we talked about in the very beginning about those seasons. We're talking about these transitional seasons, right? And how we don't talk about them often. And what I really loved about her story thus far was that, like, being in a completely different city that has obvious physical seasons reminded her of her humanness of like, oh, like it's time to rest now. And I really love that she highlighted that, because for someone who's been born and raised in the Southwest, being in Arizona and now being in San Diego, what seasons, right? So that's why I have to have a more keenness of like feeling those transitions and allowing for my humanness to transition with it. And that's why I love towards the end, she's all like, I'm going to go rest now. I was like, yes, go rest. I love that. And that's, of course, after doing some really awesome work. The second thing that I got from Hannah was it's the step by step, right? Like I know for me, like I tend to over plan and I start thinking like, what is it going to take for me to do this big leap? But like it just seemed like she rolled into all of this. I'm not going to say seamlessly, but like she's like, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to try it. I'm going to try it. And so like that's the last thing I got from her was like just this why not? Let's just try it. Let's just try it. What's the worst that can happen? And of course, with her with the cards that she's been dealt in terms of losing her parents before 30, I can only imagine like how that plays a part in her reality and how she makes these decisions. Like, man, like what's truly the worst that can happen? I've gone through a really hard part of this human life already, recognizing that like, yeah, folks, like we're gonna lose people in our lives. That might be people who helped raise us, and became so much of who we are. And so it's like, wow, like I know for me that like if and when that happens, like, like I'm gonna have to go through that reality. And like God willing, whenever that happens, it's gonna happen. But like, gosh, to do it at such, a young age, before 30, and just such pivotal times in our lives. I can only imagine. And so my heart goes out to Hannah and for everyone who has lost parents or guides and mentors and elders and people that have been a part of their journey thus far. And so I think for me, like when it comes to this show, that's why it's so what's revealing of itself is how important it is to have elders in our lives that care about us. And just know that the folks that I bring on, y'all, I'm not just bringing anybody on, right? Like, I'm not just like, oh, like, let's just get someone with the most followers or the most, whatever the case. Like, I'm bringing on good people that I would want you to potentially be mentored by, whether it's going to be virtually or in person. I'm bringing on, people that can be potential elders that you can look to and can see as role models and to aspire to be. And of course, wanting to create those opportunities for those intergenerational connections. And also just like creating a community where it's like, if you're currently in a space where the cards that you've been dealt, that you don't have people who are as supportive as Hannah's parents, then you can look to the group that I'm carefully curating for all of you. I want you to know that I think about you all the time, and I have yet to even meet you. And I think, being reflective in this moment and transparent with y'all, I'm just creating what I wish I had growing up, and it's because I don't want a young person like myself to go through life alone the way that I've gone through life alone. I felt like I've gone through life alone. When it comes to big decisions and big transitions that we go through in life, and really not feeling like I was supported or had elders to ask for guidance and mentorship from and learn from their experiences. And so this project and this first episode is so dear to me, y'all. It's revealing itself of how important it is and how much not only is it, I feel like is it needed in the world, but was needed just for my younger self. And you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. And that you, as a dot and as a star in this great big universe, you're a part of it. We're a part of all of it. And I think more than anything, how much we need each other and how connected we are in all of this. And so whether we're connecting dots in this physical plane, in the unseen plane, and trying to navigate through this life, just know that you're so important. You're so worthy. You're enough. You're needed. And just like what Hannah said, you are more than capable.